10:19 a.m. First item is the territorial acknowledgement. Students' Council of the Waterloo Undergraduate Student Association acknowledges that we live and work on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabeg and Haudenosaunee peoples. The University of Waterloo is situated on the Haldimand Tract, land promised to the Six Nations, which includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. As we're gathered electronically, I encourage all members of council to consider the relationships that they hold with the land on which they live and those of First Peoples in the territories that we find ourselves, to reflect on how colonialism continues to shape the world in which we live. Next is a motion to approve the agenda as presented. I'll assume that motion. Is there any debate on the agenda? So I guess I'll ask everybody to use Teams, please. Just so I have a speakers list in a single place. Okay, then does anybody oppose approving the agenda? Anybody oppose approving the agenda as presented? Any abstentions? Carries, and we go to approval of the minutes, of which there are none. So we move to reports. My report is first. A couple of updates that I think are prudent to bring to the attention of council. First is the elections dates and procedure that we'll be considering later. Obviously, like special general meeting is in less than 2 weeks. We're hoping to immediately start the election process following the conclusion of that meeting, provided that the new bylaws be confirmed by the members. So staff have been supporting with that. The governance review, of course, you've heard plenty about as we sort of conclude the structural component of, establishing what our governing bodies will look like at the highest level through these bylaws. We're sort of moving to the next phase, which is to consider training and transition for the new, for those who will be taking part in the new governance system. And we're receiving support from the consultants on preparing some sort of like a governance calendar for how we can manage the new, like adapting our existing board and council procedures and the policies of the corporation and make them fit in this new system. And sort of on that note, councilors may recall that in the 5-year strategic and long-range plan of this organization, there's a commitment that we'll do a governance audit. In the same point, actually, there's language about an equity audit, which we are intending to move forward with. So really this is, if the governance review is dealing with the structure of the organization, we're viewing this equity audit as like how we do the operationalizing of like, the will of the membership as expressed through our governing bodies. So we are anticipating receiving a proposal from a firm that we with which we hope to work on this. So it'll probably look like through the summer, some sort of consultation with members of governance in this organization, volunteers and coordinators of the services, our full-time staff, and sort of preparing a report for the new board's consideration. And we have also asked them if they could prepare some sort of EDI training to do during the transition for the new board after the election concludes. So stay tuned for more updates about that. And that's really the main things I have to update council about. So happy to take questions. Okay, seeing none. we will move to the president of the VP Operations and Finance.
Thank you there very much. So I'll keep my report pretty short and sweet today, and just go over a couple of the essentials that I think are really important, but I don't have a huge amount in my report this time around, all things considered. So the GRT, big thing is the UPass will be going back to regular assessment now when it started this term. So this actually doesn't really have a huge change on the impact on students able to opt in and opt out, because a lot of the criteria actually remains the same. If the student is taking completely online courses outside of the region, things like that, then they're able to opt out of the GRT UPass. And if they're on some sort of academic or professional deployment outside of the region that is not co-op, they're able to opt out of the UPass. And that still stands true. It's just it's just slightly less a convenient procedure. But we have a form now open for students in those categories, and there's still a little bit more than there is normally. But overall, the assessment method has gone back to normal. So what students are starting to see is a little bit more of the normal. And the GRT UPass fee, we're approving fees for fee changes for a number of WUSA fees today, but a little bit of an update on the other fees that we're looking at that students will be facing for council's information is the GRT UPass fee will be increasing by the amount scheduled in our agreement that was amended later. So the GRT agreed that because of the COVID-19 pandemic, that meant we didn't have the UPass for about a year. We pushed one of the fee increases because the fee increases came annually. We pushed it back a year and then lopped off the last one. So the fee increase that was supposed to come last September will instead be coming this September. So we're saving a little bit of money for students, and that's a nice thing to have. But overall, the fee will be going up a little bit as agreed with GRT in our agreement. So very predictable, very regular kind of change. And then when it comes to the health insurance plan, the dental insurance plan, the legal insurance plan, and the student assistance plan, sort of Empower Me program, those fees will all be remaining flat. So we will not be increasing those fees, and that's been approved by the board with the advice of Student Care. So I think that's a really good thing for sort of affordability for students around really important things like that as well. And other than that, I don't have a lot to say, but happy to take any questions on that or anything else.
Thanks, Matthew. So I'll note for council that we do have a special order beginning at 10:30, and it might be easiest to just move to that now rather than to start another exec report that might go over. So seeing that there are no questions for the VPOF, we will go to item 4.1 on the agenda, which is a presentation on WUSA sub-branding for information. We're joined by Krishna Akella, who is one of our marketing specialists who has been leading this work for a number of months now. So please take it away, Krishna.
Awesome, thanks, Ben. Hello, everyone. As Ben mentioned, I'm Krishna. I'm a marketing specialist at WUSA, joined in November. And since then, I've been working on this sub-branding or rebranding project. Show my screen real quick. All right, so let's jump right in. So for some context and a little refresher on what the rebranding project is all about, it's essentially for better communication of what WUSA does and why. And the second idea there is as soon as students see the new services, designs and logos, they'll recognize that they're part of WUSA. And one of the things that we're trying to address with this is not a lot of students know that the services are part of WUSA. So in bringing the brand design closer to WUSA and having more consistency amongst the services brands themselves will help students recognize that the fee they're paying to WUSA kind of goes to running these services and providing them with value. So in doing so, we have coherent communications and visuals that'll match with main brand, but at the same time, we want to have each service retain their individuality and unique design elements. And the way we do that is, we have a common element that ties to the WUSA brand, and then each service has their own set of icons and graphics and design elements and even colors. So in terms of the color overview, you'll recognize that all the colors, almost all the colors here are currently part of WUSA's palette, color palette. The only new color we've added is the orange, which represents community and peer support, sort of building the relationship and networking. And that's the color we'll be using for student-run services specifically. So what this means is that the services will have like hints or highlights of this orange color, and that'll sort of tie the services to each other in a way, and also to WUSA as a whole, to kind of again create that tie to WUSA while not being like overly in their face. So before I get to new logos, I just want to give you an overview of how we got to the new logos in the first place. So we had the internal ideation and brainstorm phase where we had to like think about, what new logos do we come up with and how we can kind of strike the balance between it, the logos and design being tied to WUSA, but at the same time, not overstepping our bounds. We created some initial mock-ups and we discussed with the campus life departments of Brendan and Kira to kind of get their input on, our mock-ups. And of course, we had really a very constructive conversation, and we, that really helped us refine the designs quite a bit and sort of bring it closer to the services and, just improve the design overall. And at that point we presented, so I personally actually scheduled calls with each of the student-run services, and did like half-hour presentations with them, gathered feedback from them, and also left them with the PPT file for about a week and a half, where they could go back and kind of go through it again and provide more feedback. And it was really helpful to kind of get that constructive feedback and work with them to refine the design and tweak the colors, or make some changes to the icons that we used. And because at the end of the day, I think like it was important that since they were going to be the ones using the logo and kind of working with it, we wanted to make sure that they're really good before we went ahead. So once I received their feedback, essentially went back to our designers and worked with them to implement the feedback. And just this past week, I revisited the designs with the services, especially the ones who had like larger changes, and we kind of worked with them to make sure they're good with this. So here are the new logos. Now, right off the bat, you'll notice they all have like similar font, similar font size as well. And we've updated some of the icons, some more than the others. A few of them do retain their same icon as they have now. For example, Glow Center still has the exact same tiles. Raise uses the fist. We just like sort of resized it a little bit so it's more impactful. The color's still the same. Women's Center uses their purple. Mates, for example, we updated their icon, worked with them to land on this icon to better represent the service they provide. But we still like have their current blue on there, so which again ties back to their current branding. So it's not completely new, but at the same time it also represents their service and has a tie back to WUSA, with the WUSA logo being on there. But so we worked with each service to kind of land here at where we are, and this is essentially where everyone's happy at this point. So these are the logos. Now, in terms of brand cohesion, this is what I was talking about in terms of all the services being tied to WUSA in a way. This is like a higher bird's eye level view, where you see events on the side here, clubs and events, commercial ops, governance and advocacy, and you have the services here. Of course, these mock-ups are not like final or anything. We are working with them to, further refine that, and we might add little elements while we build the brand guidelines for each service. But this should give you a good idea of how they might look. And you can see like they do have like these orange highlights, some more than the others, depending on what we're going for with any given like marketing promo material. Each service has their own set of colors here, and their logo. But this sort of gives you a higher level overview of how they're not really similar to WUSA, wherein like they just blend in, but at the same time they do stand out quite a bit, and each of them has their own sort of style. and visual cues that they use on the graphics. Next steps. So first is to like build brand guidelines. So I'll be like working with the services again to make sure the brand guidelines we build are quite in depth and very comprehensive. And it'll also help the designers be very be able to be easily follow the brand guidelines and create new graphics or even marketing print materials. And it'll also help the services be more clear on what the brand is, and there's no like ambiguity. So we're trying to like really go for in-depth brand guidelines this time. And yeah, we'll be working with the services. Once that's done, we'll be finalizing the implementation plan on how exactly we want to roll out, and like what elements we want to roll out to the public in what order. From a higher level perspective, though, it's going to be a soft rollout for the summer, which means it's mostly going to be like digital assets and things like that, maybe like a social media profile picture. The full rollout's going to be in the fall, where by the time the fall term starts, we want to get the printed materials out, the banners and stuff out and about, and essentially when the new students come in, they would see the updated branding. So that's where we're at right now. Any questions?
Thanks, Krishna. So seeing no questions from council, I guess I'll say, seeing how this project has developed, like in our time, we first heard about this like last spring term, and definitely has been lots of consultation. And it's, I think, very good work that will benefit the brand.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, we definitely made sure that the services were, each of the services were a big part of this, in the part of the conversation as well. So there was we definitely consulted with them to make sure they were really good in the direction we were going, and we really worked with them. So I think that's really great. And for the most part, we've had like pretty positive reception and feedback to the direction we're headed in. So yeah.
All right, thank you very much. So we will go back to item, I forget the number, but it's the report of the Vice President Education.
Hello. I tried to be fairly thorough in, you hear me? Okay, because Catherine just waved and it confused me. Unless she was waving at someone else. Again, tried to be fairly thorough, sort of in my report. So just a couple of things to highlight. Oh, yes. The university is currently working on a digital learning strategy that they're hoping to wrap up by the end of spring term. So sort of a lot of my focus this semester is lent more towards advocacy projects that will sort of have an immediate impact, just recognizing that the governance review is happening and we don't want to start too many projects that will remain unfinished. So that's sort of a discussion item that we're going to talk about in a little bit. Provincial elections are rapidly approaching. I've been meeting with candidates from the different political parties to basically discuss sort of student standpoints on a number of issues, as well as talk about opportunities for them to engage with youth voters. So WUSA will be running a couple events and campaigns with regards to that. If you are eligible to vote and you haven't registered, please do so. There's a link in my report. Very important. I literally can't do my job if you don't vote. That wouldn't be great. Sorry, I accidentally clicked away from my own report. Essentially, if you have any sort of questions on my report, I guess feel free to ask them now.
Thanks, Steph. Okay, Vincent, go ahead.
So I've tried to find the answer to this, and I wasn't able to. Are out of province students who attend Waterloo and live in Waterloo, but they're from Alberta or wherever, are they eligible to vote in the Ontario election?
I do not know off the top of my head, but I can find out. And if I find out before council ends, I will put that in the chat.
Jay says the answer. Jay was saying the answer.
Thanks both. Maybe I'm going to say incorrect information, but my understanding is if you're a resident of a province and a Canadian citizen, you're entitled to vote in a provincial election. So if you have like proof of residency in Ontario by like a virtue of a lease or something, I think so, but Steph should Steph probably
will
will
double
find
check
more
before
accurate
I-
information.
Yeah.
Jay.
Thanks.
Jay's gonna speak through my phone.
Yeah, thanks. My phone's not working today. I know like you're very busy with other projects. Can you give us an update on the co-op co-op students' rights advocacy that you have done so far?
So with regards to the co-op student rights advocacy, explain this. It's sort of on pause for now, just in recognition that a provincial election is happening, and it would be the relevant ministry who would be sort of controlling, if you're referring specifically to the Employment Standards Act, like with a new mandate, that might potentially change. And we have been talking about the fact that co-op students are explicitly excluded from the ESA with a lot of the candidates. It's just that looking back, sort of a lot of arguments and a lot of pushing has been made to include co-op students within the Employment Standards Act to no avail underneath the Conservative government. So we will probably need evidence or something else to sort of change that to boost our argument, because there's a number of letters, a number of like consultation requests that have already been made in it. Like they know students like recognize that there's a gap in the issue. They just like haven't done anything yet. So we're sort of waiting for after the provincial elections pan out to figure out where to go with that. So it is still something on my mind. I know that we have to, council has requested a report on sort of co-op student rights and discrimination in the workplace and things of that like. So I still need to work with the research team to figure out what direction that is going forward, but I don't have any more substantial updates from that.
Okay, thanks both. So seeing no further questions for the VP Education, we will move to the report of the Vice President Student Life. And there are a number of motions, which maybe I'll just read now. And would you prefer that these be done in like a single vote or like 3 separate items? Okay, they're all like relating to the same idea of like changing practices due to the governance review. So I think it's okay to probably do them all at once. If people object, then we can sort of split the question. So I'll read the motions. First is on Council Procedure 26, Service Operations in the Vice President Student Life, whereas exceptions to service coordinator selection procedures may be made by the VP Student Life subject to approval of Students' Council. Be it resolved that Students' Council suspends Council Procedure 26, Section F2A to C, Service Operations, Selection of Service Coordinators, to allow for staff to continue following standard procedure for hiring part-time staff. Next motion is on council procedures relating to IAC and clubs, whereas council understands that club administration will be fully and effectively supported by staff. And whereas Students' Council, is that meant to be a resolution? The middle, be it resolved that Students' Council suspends Council Procedure 10, Section J4 committees of the Students' Council, Internal Administration Committee. And be it further resolved that Students' Council suspends all clauses of Council Procedure 3, Federation of Student Clubs, which specify responsibilities or exclusive authorities of the Internal Administration Committee. The final motion is be it resolved that Council grants flexibility to the VP Student Life to delegate administrative responsibilities of the Campus Life Advisory Committee to staff as seen to be appropriate. So can I take you to be the mover of those motions, Catherine? Is there a second? Matthew seconds. Catherine, would you like to speak to the motions?
Sure. Are you able to hear me okay with mask and earbuds? Okay, cool. With respect to the motions, all three of them, as Ben mentioned, are getting at the same thing, which is under the new governance model, will be sort of setting student leaders free from a lot of the more administrative and operational aspects of the current executive positions, and as well as the current like student counselor roles on committees, where, for instance, on IAC, a lot of the club's administration stuff is handled through a committee of council, where it's stuff like approving new club applications and reviewing club disciplinary procedures when clubs need to be disciplined, and like approving individual club constitutional changes and stuff like that. And it's by no means a reflection of counselor performance on those committees, as well as student volunteers. Like the committees and the students on them have done great work, but I certainly think that it is a little bit antiquated of a system where we primarily rely on the advice and expertise of staff when making these decisions regardless. And the entire process for students in clubs would be streamlined if we allowed staff to simply make decisions as they come up, as opposed to, having them put together an agenda and wait until committee meetings and getting things approved and explaining everything over and over again and all of that. Where these sets of motions would allow those systems to flow more smoothly and free up student time for the types of decisions and discussions that actually require student input. I expect that these committees were born out of having a much smaller student association a while back, when having students at the helm of every little decision was still practical. But at this point, it makes a lot of sense. And as this term, my portfolio is sort of half my old student portfolio and half like scatterings of other portfolios as we transition into the new governance model. Being able to free up some of my time that was previously spent on committee work would also be beneficial to me, being able to spend time on other things that are more important for me to be doing.
Thanks, Catherine. Any questions relating to these motions? And I think maybe if you have other things you want to report, maybe we'll do that after we vote. Vincent.
So I was wondering for the having what did I do wrong?
Better? Okay. Had both mics on. For having staff deal with things like approving club applications, how would you expect staff, since I guess there's no students involved now, to deal with, someone applies to form a club that is, maybe like offensive in some way and maybe not something that we want like a club to like exist. Like, this is an extreme example. Like, let's say like someone made like a pro-racism club or something. Would like what, I guess, criteria would staff follow to determine if club should be accepted or not accepted?
Am I good to answer? Well, one thing is if it's something that is very blatantly in violation of university and campus and WUSA ethics, I assure you that staff would be readily prepared to turn down proposals such as that. Otherwise, there are general guidelines for what is and isn't appropriate for a club to be able to do, and having one or two people applying those rules would allow for more consistent application of those rules as well, which is great. Otherwise, we generally take an approach that clubs are around to allow students to gather around their own interests, and so we don't exercise too much control over what a club can and cannot be outside of things that are in obvious violation of the university's ethical guidelines. I hope that helps.
Thank you both. So I don't see any further questions for Catherine. Which means that we can proceed to a vote. So we're considering all of these motions as a single item. Given that we're still largely gathered electronically, we'll do sort of a reverse order where I'll ask, does anybody oppose the motion that has been read and is in the agenda package? Does anybody wish to abstain? Okay, hearing neither, that carries unanimously. And we'll go back to Catherine for any general updates or comments on report.
Thanks, folks. That makes my job a lot a lot easier and allows all of those systems to work a lot better. So I'm very happy that that's approved. Otherwise, business has been as usual. Lots of meetings across the university with different stakeholders. Currently, one thing is through the Undergraduate Student Relations Committee. The executives have been alongside some other people in that committee, meeting with various departments on campus to talk about accessibility. And we've also been doing regular meetings with the SSO, with Campus Wellness, all of that business to make sure that we're able to communicate our priorities and what we're seeing students maybe having issues and concerns with. Besides that, this term I'll also be the main contact point for society relations, and I will be moving into Ben's shoes to administrate meetings of COPs. So I guess look out for that soon, society presidents. And my AVP equities update is attached at the bottom of my report. Only a couple months ago or something, we submitted a pretty comprehensive report, and so I figured I would not ask her to spend too much time rehashing the same stuff. And if you have any specific questions about that, I can relay those to her and get you an answer.
Thanks, Catherine. So seeing no further questions, we move on to the report of the Board of Directors. Erroneously attributed to myself. So Abby, please.
Oops, sorry, I couldn't figure out how to unmute. Hi, everybody. So I'll just quickly go over some of the items that we discussed probably at the April meeting and then the May special. So in April, we approved the CPI increases for the UPass, which is a contractual obligation. So nothing kind of out of the blue there for you all. And then we approved the bylaws that council had previously approved. So again, those two items shouldn't be anything too out of left field for councillors. So then at the May special, the purpose of the meeting was to discuss the special general meeting, which included approving the special general meeting agenda that you should all have now, a discussion on some feedback received from that meeting, from the previous general meeting, and then just further discussion on the special general meeting processes. Again, shouldn't be something that happens every time before a general meeting, so these shouldn't be too surprising. But if there are any questions for those items, I would be happy to take them now. But I will note that the board meets again for our May regular on the 18th, which, if I am looking at my calendar correctly, is next Wednesday at 5:30 p.m.
Thanks, Abby. Seeing no questions, we will proceed to representative reports. First is Arts Caucus.
Hi, everyone. For Arts Caucus, I believe that the ASU is doing their elections right now. I'm not actually sure if they've concluded, but that's our biggest update for the team at the moment.
Thanks, Rebecca. Next is engineering.
So engineering has switched term societies again. We are now on the other societies that we weren't on last term, which I think is now B Society. So we have a new set of executives who are here for their first in-person term. So that's exciting. They're running a lot of new events, and council is going to get started running for EngSoc as well in the next few weeks.
Thanks, Edward. And I'll say as a general comment, like I'll just go through the list of caucuses to do reports, and if you have a question, just we'll find you to spare the. Did we have any questions between all of them? So next is environment.
No updates aside from the ESS Council being finalized for the spring term. Thanks.
Thanks, Jaskrin. Next is mathematics.
I can give an update. So towards the end of last term, MathSoc advocacy to get a ban on proctoring software put in place in the faculty was successful. So that's now in place in effect. As of, I guess, the beginning of this term is when the ban took effect. And usually the second highest committee in the math faculty, below like the faculty council, approved getting rid of work term reports. The faculty council had previously approved some kind of like transitionary motion, so that for almost all students that will take effect this term, and it will be like finalized to be a permanent decision, hopefully at the faculty council meeting in fall. And once that happens, we'll have no more work term reports in the math faculty. Otherwise, yeah, council is going. We had our first meeting earlier this week. I'm the speaker now. Our budget meeting is coming up. Things are just going along fine.
Thanks, Vincent. Next is health.
Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah. Okay. Health, not many updates. People are very happy that the Starbucks in the AHS expansion building is back open. I know that students were actually really looking forward to that. Awesome had their general elections as well. So the new team is in place, and yeah, just getting ready for spring term.
Thank you, Amelia. Next is science.
Okay, so we just had our elections done last term, and right now we're hiring coordinators for the spring term. Some of our clubs are also doing their elections for spring, and hopefully once that's done, we're hoping to have a board of directors meeting sometime next week. Beyond that, not much else, just kind of trying to get things started for spring.
Thank you, Rosa, and welcome to council. Next is Cambridge. From which we may not have any present representatives, which brings us to Kitchener.
Hi everyone, my name is Kia. I'm representing the Kitchener campus, which would be the School of Pharmacy. In terms of updates, there is nothing really. I'm sorry, did I get that correct? This is Kitchener referring to School of Pharmacy? This
That's
is just okay, cool. So as you can probably tell, this is my first meeting. There has been this is the beginning of my presidency term on the Society of Pharmacy Students, or SOPS for short. And yeah, there's nothing other than that to update. The dispensary at the School of Pharmacy, which has been newly implemented recently, everyone is really enjoying it. Nothing but positive feedback from there so far. So that's one thing I can say so far. And I'm not sure if Shirley had anything else, who's our WUSA rep, if she had anything else to add, but otherwise that's all the updates on our end.
Thanks, Kia, and welcome to council as well. Next is Stratford. From which I suspect we have no present representatives, which brings us to St. Jerome's.
Hi, this is also my first meeting as the president of the St. Jerome Students Union. We really don't have any updates besides the fact that we just had our executive elections, so we have a whole new team in now, and we're just trying to find our footing. But besides that, no updates from St. Jerome's.
Thanks, Sinead, and welcome to council. Next, finally, is Renison. Okay, from which there are no present representatives. That brings us to officers of council reports. I don't think I have anything particularly to report in my capacity as speaker, other than this is the first in-person meeting or hybrid meeting that we've done in many years. Maybe next time we'll pick the black and gold room with some sunshine and windows instead of decrepit NPR, but we're here. Maybe we'll have food to bribe people next time. Any questions? Vincent?
Just to comment, I'm very much in favor of food because council meetings happen like around lunchtime. And so I think it's appropriate to give councilors lunch. And I also think it will increase attendance for in-person meetings, which then I find have better communication than online meetings.
Thanks, Vincent. Duly noted. Next is a deputy speaker report. If you have anything you'd like to say, Canon?
Nope.
Okay. And then secretarial reports, if Matthew or Michael perhaps have anything they'd like to say.
I have nothing particular to say right now as corporate secretary, but if Mike has anything he'd like to say, now is the time.
This is me testing out a microphone. Yay. Okay. I don't have many updates. Council swag is being ordered finally. Sorry about the delay on that. You'll get some fun stuff in the next 2 months. We don't know delivery timelines yet. But thank you for being part of council. I now have an easier way to upload minutes to the WUSA website, so you should see more files up there really soon. The WUSA website is new. If there are any issues with the council page or any sort of pieces that you see that are wrong, feel free to send them to Matthew, Ben, or myself, and we will pass them on to the IT team. That's all I got.
Thanks, Mike. So the only other thing is the final general order we have is about meeting dates, which have been picked a little arbitrarily, but we can discuss then. Vincent. Vincent has withdrawn. And Steph, would you like to comment on the Ontario Elections Act stuff that you've just sent in chat?
Yeah, so I personally can't find anything that like confirms it. But essentially the requirement and sort of like the like relevant legislation is that you need to like reside in the electoral district, and like residency is not something that is like specifically defined, but in general it's like you have like you primarily live there, you have like ties or whatnot to it. Apparently it's possible to be a resident of two provinces at once, despite that being sort of unlikely. I would say an out-of-province student can like try to register to vote with what materials they have. But I will say that looking at sort of the e-registration form, it gives me the sense that you should have like made your driver's license or your health card or something like that transfer over. So you might not have as much success if you say normally like your parents live in BC, you're using like the BC sort of insurance plan, you're intending to go back there sometime in the future. Like if you haven't transitioned sort of other documents sort of over and have some sort of intent to live in Ontario, then like you can definitely try to register to vote. I just don't know if you would be successful.
Vincent has a response.
Thanks, Steph. I was wondering, would it be possible for you to, I guess, just inquire with Elections Ontario or whoever and just confirm like how and under what conditions out of province students could vote? Because I think if we could confirm that and then share that information with students, then that would lead to a lot more students voting in the election. Because
I will find that out.
Province students know whether or not they're allowed to vote or how to vote.
Okay. Yep. Sounds good.
Okay. That brings us to end of term reports from the associate vice presidents. These were written reports appendaged to this agenda. I guess we'll give councillors an opportunity to ask any questions that they have arising from them. I don't know if any of the relevant VPs have something that, okay, Vincent.
I saw Ren's report. In Ren's report, they mentioned something about gender neutral washrooms and advocacy around there. MassLife has also been working on that. And so it would be great if you could reach out to our president to kind of see if there's any way that we can, work together or just like mutually support each other's efforts, things like that. I know last term when I was VP, I was talking with a friend about MassLife sharing some posters and stuff that they were working on. But yeah, I think there's just good areas for collaboration there.
Thanks, Vincent. Catherine.
Oh, I just realized, never mind. I'll just talk about it offline. It doesn't need to be here.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no further comments on the reports of the associate vice presidents, we shall move on. We have concluded our special order previously, which brings us to general orders. And the first general order is approval of revised elections and referenda procedure and election dates for spring 2022. So I will, pardon me, I'll yawn. Then I will read the motion and then I'll speak to it briefly. Whereas new bylaws passed by council in winter 2022 term require changes to elections processes than those under the new model, under the old model. And whereas changes to elections procedure are the responsibility of Students' Council, be it resolved that the Students' Council approve the attached revised procedures so that they may be used for the inaugural election of the new board for the spring 2022 term. Be it further resolved that the Students' Council approve the following timeline for spring 2022 elections. 26th of May would be that elections are called and nominations are opened. The 17th of June, nominations close and an all candidates meeting held. 19th of June, campaigning begins. The 28th of June, voting begins. The 30th of June, voting and campaigning end. And either the 4th or 5th of July, results be announced. So I will move this. Is there a second? I see Matthew has seconded, Matthew Schwartz. So I'll make a couple comments on the elections and referenda procedure specifically. One item, so the governance committee met last week to discuss this. The governance consultants took our existing elections and referenda procedure and then sort of made revisions to adapt it to the new model. This is really I would expect that by the time we have a second general election in the new model, that these would be probably entirely rehauled. So this is kind of like a for the time being set of procedures. A couple of comments are that wherever the president is mentioned in the existing procedure, it has been transferred to the executive director. Any mention of council, the language has been changed to the board for the new board, which will be, of course, the sole governing body. And one comment that came up at governance committee was on the fact that for multi-seat races, so for the board, these procedures provide for the automatic acclamation of candidates if the number of candidates is equal to or less than the number of seats available, which is a departure from what we do presently, where we have an acclamation vote. The reason that this automatic acclamation has been included is that it's sort of inconsistent with the faculty guarantee, where, say, there's a sole candidate from a given faculty, they essentially are acclaimed, they would be exempted from this yes/no vote, which is an inconsistency. Having automatic acclamation is also simpler, and it's been recommended by the consultants that we do this. Furthermore, we should expect that there be substantially more competition in elections due to the fact that we're reducing the number of available seats by about a third, to a third of what it is. And we're also increasing compensation for directors substantially. So all of this means that we really should expect there to be a competitive election. So the scenario in which there's acclamations is unlikely to arise, and even if so, I think it's justified given the sort of the inconsistency with the faculty guarantee and having an acclamation yes/no vote. So otherwise, these have been reviewed by the governance committee, and I don't have a complete list of the revisions that were made on hand, but they have been reviewed by a committee anyway, and our consultants. So happy to take any questions on election stuff. Vincent?
So when I was looking through the document, I don't think the procedure is clear on for the faculty guarantee. Like, let's say there are two students from environment or some other small faculty, neither of them get enough votes to win, like without the faculty guarantee model. I don't think the procedure says how we determine which of those two gets elected. The obvious and I think correct way to do that is like the last one to be eliminated in like the STV rounds. but I don't think that's actually specified in the policy, unless I missed it.
Thanks, Vincent. Yeah, so that is correct. I can say that like the instructions that I've given to our like IT team who are building the STV system are consistent with what you've described. It really is a matter of like having these procedures in place for an election that's upcoming, and like I'd say in the future, I expect that we would have the more specific details in the procedure, but they have been written in a more general fashion this time to like allow us to do something given the sort of short timeline we've had to prepare it. Essentially, like, not to do too much detail before council, but basically like there are like three. So essentially like for the 11 director seats, it's an STV election with runoffs and you have to build a quota. There are three cases where the faculty guarantee can like essentially intervene in that. The first being there's only one candidate from a faculty, in which case they're acclaimed at the start of the race. The number of available seats is reduced by the number of people who are so acclaimed. Then there's sort of the immediate scenario where the final candidate who is eliminated, as you've described, before having reached a quota from a faculty, is basically there's an intervention in that round where they would be eliminated and they're taken. And then at the end, if there are two candidates remaining from a faculty which has not had a successful candidate, then at the last round, you take the one who has more votes than the other. So like the system is being designed consistent with that. It's just not enumerated in the procedure, which has been written in a more sort of general fashion, if that is a helpful answer.
Would it be possible or make sense to, I guess, add a additional be it resolved clause to task, I guess, the next board to, you know, go through and revise some of the parts of this policy that I guess are not entirely complete? Can I move? Yeah, I'll move that. Be it further resolved that Students' Council task the next board to review and revise this policy.
So Matthew Schwartz has seconded that motion. So Robert's rules, we're now debating an amendment. Does anybody have comments on the amendment that Vincent has proposed to task the new board with reviewing this procedure in time for the next general election? So I see Edward has a direct response.
Just a question of procedure. Are we able to task a board that hasn't been elected yet? Is that something we usually are able to do?
So I'll say in the existing bylaws, the council is empowered to make recommendations to the board. I think it's consistent with what we intend that like council make recommendations for the new governing body. I see no reason why we wouldn't be able to do this, I guess.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for Vincent's amendment? Okay, we'll take it to a vote. So we're voting on the amendment to add a resolution which tasks the new board with reviewing the procedure. Mike has language, I suspect. Sort of.
Sorry. Be it further resolved, Student Council task the incoming board with reviewing this election procedure to make changes for next year. Sure.
You can put that in the chat.
Yep. SC is my student council shorthand for all that want to know.
Thanks, Mike. So I'll read it and then we'll vote. So an amendment to add the clause, be it further resolved that Students' Council recommended the incoming board with reviewing and revising this election procedure for next year, which has been moved by Vincent and seconded by Matthew. So does anybody oppose the amendment that has been proposed? Does anybody wish to abstain? Okay, hearing neither, the amendment carries unanimously. We're back to the main motion, which has been amended. Yeah, I'll say the spirit of the motion is clear. The wordsmithing, I think, is acceptable to make minor editorial changes. Okay, so that brings us back to the main motion, which is to approve the dates set out here and the procedure that has been presented. Does anybody else wish to? Oh, Jay had a comment.
I have two questions about this procedure. For the nomination requirement, it says for director position, it says requires 25 nominations from appropriate constituency. That it means 25 students from any faculty or from your own faculty.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, so that's, if you could mute.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, just the hybrid meeting fun. So yes, appropriate constituency would be understood as from any student. Any student can nominate any candidate. And given that there's a single pool of candidates. So that's even something that maybe the language could be, for future consideration, it could be made clearer. But any student can nominate any candidate or prospective candidate. No further questions. Oh, go ahead.
My second question is about the technology side. Has the technical problem for the new model or the new election method being resolved or not?
Thanks, Jay. So so we do have our IT team preparing to do sort of a mock election internally, so we can work through the kinks and really the issue is these override cases that I kind of described earlier, where there's different scenarios where it can be done. So the governance consultants had prepared sort of technical documentation on the cases that can arise that I described. It may be difficult to code it in. I'm confident that the team can figure it out. And in the worst case, we can do a single transferable vote model with Excel runoff, votes and all this stuff, and then intervene according to the cases that I've described. So the first being there's a single candidate nominated from a faculty, they're automatically acclaimed. The second is the final candidate from a faculty which has not had a successful candidate is about to be eliminated. They basically we intervene in that case. And then at the end, there being multiple candidates from a faculty which has not had a successful candidate. You pick the one who has the most votes or is the closest to a quota. But we have been working with the IT team to try to get ahead of this problem before, obviously before the election. So next is Vincent, I believe.
So how do we account for the case of a student who's registered in multiple faculties? I think software engineering, I think CFM students are also in multiple faculties.
Thanks. So I believe that we are intending to consider those students as eligible for like both faculties for the override case. So like a software engineering student could be it. Basically, I don't believe that we're intending to ask people to declare what faculty they would like to be considered for the purpose of the faculty guarantee. Like we're considering there's basically like any program and CPA or any program and financial management, software engineering, and there's like a handful of them. Those will be basically considered for both faculties for the purposes of the guarantee. So if there's a sustainability and financial management student and no math candidates, they could be acclaimed for the math part. Or sorry, oh no, for the arts part. Please go ahead.
I ask why it was chosen to do it that way.
So I think I think doing it in that way is the least intrusive on like the SDB process, where it reduces the number of interventions that would occur, which I think is desirable because then the results would more closely reflect that of like of just a simple single transferable vote election. Is that sufficient? Good. Any further questions? Okay, so we will move to a vote on the motion as amended. Does anybody oppose the motion? Does anybody wish to abstain? Hearing neither, that carries unanimously. And we move to item 5.2 on fee changes for the 2022 to 2023 academic year. There's a motion, whereas Article 4.2 of the existing bylaws of WUSA whereas by Article 4.2 of the bylaws of WUSA, it is the responsibility of Students' Council to increase fees by an amount not exceeding CPI plus increases in staffing costs of current positions. Then be it resolved that Students' Council index WUSA's schedule of membership dues, administered fees, and the orientation fee by the 2021 CPI rate of 3.4% according to the figures in the attached fee schedule. And be it further resolved that Students' Council further increase student life, academic support and advocacy and operations fees by 7 cents each to reflect increased staffing costs over and above the rate of inflation, as also noted in the attached fee schedule. Be it further resolved that the Students' Council ratify the following changes to the society fees for fiscal year 2023. Engineering Society increased from $17.84 to $18.44 to adjust for changes to the Consumer Price Index of Canada, and the Society of Pharmacy Students and Mathematics Society have changed their fees to be compulsory at the point of payment and refundable upon request. So I will take Matthew to be the mover of this and Catherine to second. And administrative note, Jay and Marie have left us. Thanks for joining. Okay, Matthew, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, I would. Thank you very much. So really, it is what it says on the box, exactly as Ben read out. This is just CPI increase to the fee, to our schedule of fees. The way that our bylaws are structured and the way that our fee increases work is any increases over and above the rate of inflation are required to go to a general meeting, because that is like adding new programs, new things that we want to get students' consent on. But when it comes to ongoing things that have been previously approved by students in order to maintain purchasing power and the ability to continue to offer things at the same level, then Students' Council is empowered to automatically increase fees by a rate of CPI plus the rate of staff salary increases. And what that is like, because we run on the university's HR system and people are paid according to increases on there, if the increases in staff salaries for the year exceed the rate of CPI, we can further index the fee just to cover that cost. So the way that that's calculated is the percentage increase in current staff salaries, and then you subtract from that the rate of CPI, and then you have left over how much more money you need to cover that increase, which turned out to be about 21 cents, which is why we're adding 7 cents to each of those 3 fees. You can take a look just after my report in the appendix. There is a fee schedule that breaks down the specific figures for each fee that I'm asking you to take a look at today. The 3 main fees: the undergraduate capital program, the student refugee program, student publications, and the orientation fee. So that's sort of that. I'm happy to go into any questions or any thoughts that anybody has, but otherwise I think it's a relatively straightforward fee increase.
Thanks, Matthew. Vincent, would you like to speak?
I'm happy to see the part about the society fees. I want to return to compulsory at point of payment and refundable upon request. Can you, I guess, tell us a bit about what the status is with UW Finance on making this change? Additionally, I think NSOC also made this decision, but that was a while ago. Has council already ratified the change for NSOC?
NSOC brought that change forward last year. I sort of took it as given that change was ratified, approved. I don't recall if we explicitly ratified it, to be honest with you. I suppose it was my assumption because that was something done for last year, last September. Regardless, there is very clearly a common understanding that was done, so I'm not too worried, but I wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that. In terms of where that sits right now with UW Finance, we haven't gotten an explicit direction from them, though we've been in pretty constant communication and letting them know about this direction. And we also spoke to the university president about it when we had a meeting with him last. So we haven't explicitly gotten a sense that they're going to be okay with it. We have our GM, our item approved at the general meeting that we've informed them about, that students said that they were in favor of societies being able to democratically choose their own fees and fee assessments, which we think is important, as well as the letter from COPS, I believe, has gone through as well, from the society presidents backing this idea as well. So that's all going to be transmitted to UW Finance with this, and I believe the university has already seen this stuff. To be honest with you, I don't know if they're going to still try to shoot it down, but I'm transmitting it anyway.
Vincent?
To elaborate a bit on what happened at the discussion with the president. Additionally, if the university doesn't accept this change, what actions would you then take?
In terms of the discussion with the UW president in that meeting, we informed him of this being one of our big concerns. We brought 4 big concerns forward to him, and we elaborated a little bit on it. And then he told us that he would go back and discuss it internally. We haven't heard back from that. And then in terms of if they don't assess this how we would like, the reality of the matter is all of our fees are assessed through their system. We can continue to push them on it. We can continue to say, hey, this is what students want, and try to reassure them on their specific fears. The specific reasoning that they outlined initially as to why they didn't want to do this is that, students themselves aren't always aware of why fees are differential or charged on a differential way across faculties, and that creates confusion. They get people reached out to them, and they have like parents calling and complaining, all of which, when things are approved through a democratic system at a society, I don't think that makes much sense. But regardless, we also now have a decision directly from the WUSA membership at a general meeting that says that, so that should assuage those fears and those concerns. But to be honest with you, at the end of the day, our fees are assessed through their fee assessment system, and we cannot assess our fees in our own mechanism. And that means that there is an inherent power imbalance. So we can keep pushing on it. We can keep talking about it. We're not in a position where we can like make them do something,
Vincent?
If despite all that the university refuses to comply with the democratic will of students, is there any potential to consider any legal action?
I'll intervene, I guess. So the agreement that we have with the university is available on our website, and basically the understanding is that the Board of Governors will consider any fee schedules that we send them, but they have the sole authority to do it. So there's no basis on which we can like get around that. I'll happily link it in the chat, but I mean, I suppose a board would be free to do that if they so wish, but it probably would be not advisable. I'll link in the chat the agreement, although it might be, now we have this like SharePoint, it gets a little complicated. If you, it's on the WUSA library page, if you go to agreements, it's in the first one. But there basically is like very little basis on which, like, the university has the sole power to approve any fees that we assess, and we have agreed to that. And it's like they hold the power, as Matthews said. Any other questions on this item? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
A follow-up question. This is an important issue for math students. Have you been working with the faculty, like working with or in communication with the faculty deans in terms of pressuring finance? I know the math dean told MassLock that he wants the university to respect MassLock's decision to return to the refund model, and expected that other deans would, that all the deans would basically be on the same page here in terms of wanting finance to respect this decision. So I was wondering if, have you been talking to the deans and asking them to, pressure their appropriate people? And if you haven't done that yet, could you look into doing that?
I have not been in communication with the deans, although there was a little bit of communication, or at least like secondary communication through NSOC, I believe, to about their efforts with their engineering dean. I haven't been in communication with the deans. I'm happy to look at that going forward. But at this time, I haven't talked to the math and engineering deans.
Thanks. And I'll just add, so I sent this past week the letter signed by some of the members of the Committee of Presidents. I have yet to hear a response from the Vice President, Administration and Finance of the university. So I will keep council apprised of what we hear. Okay, next, or so we have to vote on this. Are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none. Does anybody oppose the motion as presented? Oh, sorry.
So if the main issue with finance is that not all societies have voted to return to the refund model yet, given that I think the biggest societies, which I think might compose a majority of students, I'm not sure on that, but is there a, I guess a threshold at which if a certain number of societies, but not all of them, vote to return to the refund model, we would consider just imposing returning to the refund model on the remaining societies?
On that, theoretically, I believe council has authority over all fees, including society fees, and that's generally in place so that if society is not in a position to meet a general meeting, but they need to change something, the council has that authority. In my opinion, I think that would be forcing something on a society actively, as us as WUSA, versus it sort of being forced on us to not change something. I would oppose that on the same basis that we are opposing them not allowing us to switch. So I personally would not support, and I do not think WUSA should consider forcing societies to assess fees in a mandatory way if they don't want to. I think that there is a big difference in the philosophical sense in fighting against, but for the time being unsuccessful at stopping that forcing happening, rather than like consciously doing it ourselves.
Any further questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to a vote. Does anybody oppose the motion as presented in the agenda on item 5.2? Does anybody wish to abstain? Hearing neither, carries unanimously. And we will move on to item 5.3, which is on UWaterloo's digital learning strategy. Steph?
For a moment, I forgot I put that in there. But yeah, just as a recap, so as part of the university's strategic plan, they wanted to develop sort of a unified strategy towards digital learning. Obviously, a lot of advances have been made in that area as a result of the pandemic. Unfortunately, a lot of the I guess it's many projects happening at once in a very sort of disjointed way, in ways where perhaps students' sort of needs have been overwritten just with the amount of different software that is being used and the amount of exceptions that were made because we were in crisis mode. So now there's a sort of question of, well, what does the future of digital learning look like? Does the university sort of continue to invest in online courses? Are they offered by the Center for Extended Learning? Are they able to operate differently? What e-learning tools are professors allowed to use? Questions sort of those nature are things that we're going to be considering as part of that committee. And it's had sort of the they've sent like the provost there and the AVP academic at the university. So obviously it's a really important committee at the university, and I'm the representative for undergraduate students. So I'm going to be doing a bunch of consultation around that, including sort of just a preliminary conversation here. So I guess if anyone has any sort of feedback for the vision of digital learning or some issues they'd like us to explore, I guess start now. I just ask that you focus more so on sort of looking down the road 5-6 years, and less so on griping about particular complaints about COVID-19.
Thanks, Steph. So any questions about or comments on digital learning strategies? Okay. Vincent.
So I guess not really a COVID gripe, but small gripe is not really a big fan of. There's only like one undergrad student, which is you on this working group, right? I feel like there should be more student involvement. Like I think at minimum there should, in addition to you, I think we should have one student from each faculty, like undergraduate student from each faculty. I'm not really sure if, a top-down centralized approach. I mean, I think there's a role for part of that, but I don't think you can solely do this in that way. Because I think the ways in which students learn is, it's going to vary a lot between courses, which can probably like roughly group, different, ways of teaching online courses, probably roughly by faculty. Like teaching a math course is going to be very different than teaching, most arts courses. And so, I guess what are they going to do to, I guess, make sure that the university is, properly serving the unique needs of the various faculties rather than just trying to like impose something like from the top that, maybe only works for some faculties, or, kind of, but not really works for all of the faculties? Like, how do we make sure that, all students are getting the best experience that meets the unique needs of their various programs?
Yeah, so on the committee, basically developing the proposed strategic plan over that, like it consists of like folks from multiple faculties. Unfortunately, not a lot of student representation, but there is sort of a lot of prof representation and folks from different sort of academic support units that exist within the university. So their sort of responsibility is to communicate with their colleagues and sort of figure out within their own sort of pedagogical paradigms, I guess, what sort of needs for flexibility there needs to be. But at the same time, there's sort of this, like, I don't think the plan is to be specifically rigid and say that you're only allowed to use like this software. It would be more so sort of criteria around, well, it needs to be cost effective, it needs to meet accessibility requirements, needs to meet privacy requirements, blah, 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 where are they hosted in, who gives approval, things of that nature. I have sort of brought up the fact that, just being one undergraduate student representing the student voice on what is a very broad issue can be quite difficult. But at the end of the day, we're more so preparing a report that then gets received by sort of other groups, of which I'm hoping there's more sort of a student vote and representation there. I would say that providing sort of feedback to like the particular faculty individual for your faculty, as well as myself, would help sort of bolster the student voice there. Otherwise, I'm doing my best to consolidate all the feedback that we've collected during COVID-19 and in creating the USA Tech-enabled learning paper. Just enough evidence to sort of give voice to sort of student concerns.
Thank you both. Any further comments on digital learning strategies? Okay.
Wait. Sorry. I was gonna say I'm probably gonna send like a follow-up email to council, just going over some of what we've already submitted to the committee. Again, we're developing sort of a consultation plan with our full-time staff in the committee to figure out how to reach out to different undergraduate students. Again, society presidents in particular, I'd appreciate your support, sort of engaging with your students and figuring out what was good about online learning, what wasn't. Things like Proctor software, e-textbooks, micro-credentials, all that sort of jazz. So I guess start thinking about that, start having conversations there, because I will start knocking on your doors eventually.
Thanks, Steph. So having concluded that discussion, we move to our final general order on meeting dates for the rest of this term. There have been 3 dates proposed. First is the 12th of June, then the 10th of July, and the 14th of August. All at 10 in the morning. So I guess I will move that we accept these dates. I will note, I guess, so is there a second? Okay, Matthew seconds. I'll note it's atypical for council to meet during an election period, but in order for us to have a meeting in June, I mean, the election period is going to be the entire month. So if we're going to have a meeting in June, then we need to, like, it necessarily will be during the election period, though it's before the campaign period. Pardon? Yes. Though it's before campaigning, so hopefully should not be too grandstandy. So does anybody have comments on these meeting dates? Okay, so I suppose we'll continue with this hybrid stuff and make attending in person more appealing. Okay, so we'll go to a vote. Does anybody oppose the meeting dates presented? Does anybody wish to abstain? Okay, carries unanimously. We go to new business. Is there any other business? Rebecca?
It's not so much new business, but I was just wondering, like, what happens after the June election, since we're having like meeting dates until August? Is there going to be like a turnover of people? Or, because I was also like, is council still going to exist in the way that it exists right now?
Thanks, Rebecca. So I do think we'll continue to have council meetings just because like the new board won't actually take office until September 1st. So our existing board and council will stay in their positions until like through the end of the spring term. And it may be useful for us to bring issues here to discuss as may arise. Of course, there might be some like common membership among council and the new board who will be transitioning likely in July and August, probably more so in August. So yeah, council will exist until, I mean, provided that the bylaws are confirmed at the special general meeting, council will exist until the end of this term. And then we'll have sort of our formal like transition date to the new board. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. So the composition like of council isn't set to change until September either, right?
That's right. Unless the societies provide new designates or other changeover like that. But if you have been elected to council, you are welcome to stay on until the end of the spring term. Okay. Any other business? Vincent?
Thank you, Vincent. I noticed that the next meeting date in the announcements is October, which is my complete mistake when I was drafting the agenda. So please disregard that. The next meeting date is in fact whatever it says on the agenda.
Indeed, council is not able to travel back in time. Okay, announcements then. Please, with a cherry on top, show up to the special general meeting, tell all your friends, sign up proxies. It's the critical path to the, you know, paradise or whatever. Yeah, thanks for showing up. Have a good weekend. I adjourn the meeting at 11:53.